Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Badenoch and Strathspey Area Committee. This meeting will be uploaded to the internet and will be available for public viewing thereafter. The standards Teams protocols apply. And just to remind you, you can please use the electronic hand if you need to speak. I don't think I need to say any more. Apologies for absence. John Bruce may be late. He has a rather important appointment this morning. So we'll do no further than that. Are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair, from Councillor Hadley, a non-financial declaration in item 5 as a board member of the Badenoch Great Places project, and will remain and take part in the meeting having applied the test outlined in the Councillor's Code of Conduct, and also a financial interest in item 9 as a council house tenant, but in terms of the dispensation granted by the Standards Commission, will remain and participate in the meeting. Okay.
Members, we knew straight away it's not something that we normally do here, but we have a notice of motion. And the notice of the motion has been received by Head of Corporate Governance. The members of the Badenoch and Strathspey Area Committee recognise and fully support the efforts of Highland Council staff in delivering council services while continuing to support partner organisations and our communities during the period of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, sometimes I get the impression that people don't actually realise the Herculean efforts that council staff have made during this pandemic. And that's never been more apparent than during this very lengthy cold spell. Now, here in Badenoch and Strathspey, we've had snow and ice every day since before Christmas. And whilst we've had colder temperatures before and we've had more snow before, this is the longest cold spell for many, many years. And day after day, our road crews have been out there before dawn, making sure we can get to work or to the shops or even to the vaccination centre. And many of them haven't had a day off since Christmas. You know, for example, the Bridge of Brown Road has been blocked for over a week along a 5-kilometre stretch with drifts about 3 metres deep. And many other roads in the area have just been as badly affected. And obviously the same can be said about our refuse crews who have continued to work all the way through the pandemic. They're all doing a fantastic job in the most difficult of circumstances. You know, whether they've been working from home, driving a snowplow, or making sure our children get the best education possibly, they all deserve a medal and should be really appreciated. I have Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to unmute. I very much hear you, and I've personally, one of the things that has always struck me before the COVID was any time I entered a council building was the camaraderie that the teams offered one another and the peer support that they had working together. And they've provided very difficult services with very reduced budgets for quite some time prior to the COVID incidents happening, which has hit them just as it has hit every other person in the country, making them work from home, making them isolated from their peer groups, and basically making life that little bit more difficult, but with the added responsibility of the lack of services that they have had to manage with regard to loss of staff and loss of abilities. They feel responsible, and it's very hard as a councillor, as that bridge between the staff and the public, to stress that enough, that every single staff member is facing all of the difficulties that everybody else is, but with that added pressure of having to provide to keep people's lives safe and easy. And when I see the Highland Council being the subject of people's discontent, I think it's hard to recognise all of the faces that sit behind those words. You know, the Highland Council is more than just a service providing operation. It's a bunch of people that work incredibly hard and care incredibly hard about where they are. And I think I'm pleased to bring this motion forward with the rest of my colleagues to say just how much we see them and how much we appreciate them and how much we care about them. Mental health, physical health and all, that they're there for us, and we'd really like to thank them.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair. we can't name every group of staff that work in Highland Council, but I think we've got to recognise that the hundreds and hundreds that make up the delivery of all the services we take for granted. And I think we need to reflect that our bins have been emptied in a timely manner. All these important things that impact in our daily life. And it is testament to that these people are part of our community, part of your community, and we must salute them as well and be grateful for going beyond the call of duty on many occasions.
Yeah, I'm automatically assuming that Councillor Bruce would feel somewhat similar, and since he's not here, but he is a signatory to the motion. So can we agree the motion, please? Okay, thank you. We now move to item 4, which is Business Gateway, and we have a guest this morning, Danny Gallagher from Business Gateway. So Danny, over to you. You've got a small presentation for us, and you maybe take a few questions if necessary afterwards. Cheers.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, members, and good morning, Chairman. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I really just have a brief verbal report on the business support the Business Gateway gives, and also Highland Council as well. I think the pandemic, as we'd all acknowledge, has decimated many sectors of the economy. So if I can just give an overview of how the services have supported businesses through this very fragile time. I think if nothing else, I think it demonstrates Highland Council's strength and ability to respond and deliver in a crisis generally. In practical terms, we should acknowledge the employees called upon and the wider corporate effort of coordinated teams. I think that's allowed us to understand that we've a far more flexible workforce than we thought. And when they had to step up, they did. For many, they were the ones burning the midnight oil. So the core team for delivering the grants is the Economy Regeneration team. But as I mentioned, we have been able to call upon others in the wider Economy and Infrastructure team and business support to act as application processors. We have, dependent on schemes, had the non-domestic rates team assisting, but assessors have also helped us when queries have related to original assessments. Some of the original NDR items weren't specific enough for us to award grants. So that local knowledge was invaluable to ensure businesses got the support. We have a small but dedicated team in finance, getting it onto the finance system for tax payments. There's also been support from the internal audit fraud team, as unfortunately we've had to deal with some of the unsavoury areas related to the funds. Also a great effort by the digital services team on designing and setting up the online application forms. We know from other schemes it's not as easy as it would appear just to upload application forms online. All of these employees have contributed to delivering some £85 million at present to over 8,000 businesses, many of which have now received multiple grants. Now, this is the third largest grants processing in Scotland, so a good news story really for Highland Council. Much of the work behind the scenes has been achieved by our partners too, Cairngorm National Park Authority, Cairngorm Business Partnership, Federation of Small Businesses, Highlands and Isles Enterprise, the DMOs, and I have to say the valuable work of elected members. The partnership working, I think, has been refreshing. I know it's something that we talk about, but pre-COVID on many occasions, it wasn't particularly successful, and I include myself in that. This has changed significantly and a real positive takeaway. And if we look wider in Scotland with other local authorities, COSLA, Slade, they've all been invaluable as we're now fully engaged and have a wealth of knowledge to draw from. And interestingly, many with similar issues to Highland, and some solutions will be useful going forward. So as Chairman said, I run the Business Gateway Highland service, so it would be remiss of me not to mention my team who've also been heavily involved in the grant application process. But I think it's also useful to give a general overview of the Business Gateway service in Highland. We've delivered almost 1,600 businesses with support since April. The grant support and organisational restructuring, selling digitally, expert help on survival. And we've got a team that have had to work differently. More importantly, we've had to retrain and refresh our knowledge base. Business survival is not an area we dealt with day to day post-COVID. that has clearly changed. So it's been a good learning curve for our service as well. But I have to say, it's not all doom and gloom. We've had 152 startups, some spotting opportunities linked to the pandemic. But we should note that this startup number is about 50% down on the same period last year. So we've got work to do. Interestingly, pre-COVID, the BG service in Highland were the only business gateway service in Scotland delivering support for startup workshops online. Now, reasoning at the time was potential startups' employment or lifestyle, along with geography, was sometimes a barrier to attending, but the digital delivery allowed us to move quickly to an online webinar platform for all other workshops almost immediately. Now, I'd like to say that that was skill on our part, but if I'm honest, it was probably a bit of luck. There are also many other webinars to support businesses, and that includes things like starting up in challenging times, restructuring your business in 2021, business survival, advice, tips, actions you can take now. I don't know if we ever ran that kind of workshop in the last decade, but we are now. There are also a number of tutorials, podcast number 2, and looking ahead, we're planning a number of projects, programs to support businesses as we move out of lockdown. Our challenge will be to get businesses to move from survival mode to investment mode, and we'll look to identify whatever funding options we can to support and encourage these activities. Employer incentive scheme is just one, and our digital support grant proved very popular. And thanks in part to our discussions with the Scottish Government, that funding was doubled. In terms of local support, Lochaber is a good example of a local digital fund where Lochaber members are supporting our efforts to fund digital help for businesses. And some of the more general support will include organisational restructuring, helping businesses become more resilient, improve their ability to manage, change and continue trading during periods of uncertainty. And there's also important issues around health and wellbeing for owners and employees. And at Business Gateway, we're building the content for a mental health webinar. If all goes well, we hope to introduce this next month. And we can't forget the focus of Brexit. We're running a number of EU-specific webinars and have a dedicated section on our website about EU support. And if nothing else, I would encourage all businesses and elected members to sign up to our newsletter, which gives updates, timelines, and all the information about our support services. And also, like the Facebook pages, we tailor our Highland ones to the local areas. So again, thank you very much for inviting me, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions.
Danny, firstly, can you maybe send us an email with the links to those that you've just mentioned? But really, I suppose, firstly and foremostly, on behalf of all the businesses that you and your staff have helped since the start of the pandemic, I'd really like to express my thanks. Many of them who I've directed towards yourselves have come back to me and said what fantastic help they've received. So really, from them, just a big thank you. But I think really the work for you it hasn't really just started yet. I think the big problem that we're going to have is when we begin to come out of lockdown, when we're slammed with the effects of Brexit, and local businesses will need support and professional support, and that's what you're able to give them. But also it should be for Highland Council to adequately fund the service. So it's just putting a marker down that in the budget process, some thought needs to be given to organisations like Business Gateway. And I'm really so pleased that you came here today to tell us about the service, and we should all be really chuffed about it, to be honest. Councillor Coburn.
Danny, thank you very much for that. That was really helpful. And just to reiterate what the convener has said there, a couple of questions for you. I think your team have proved very fleet of foot before this, and I think it's important that we, as a council, invest in your team for the way forward, because we all know about the COVID effect. We talk about long COVID in the clinical environment, but we've got long COVID in our economic environment too. So I think that's important, and we've got the Brexit factor. I'd like a wee bit more information on your fraud team, because everything with everything that comes up, there are always some circumstances where people are creative, shall we say, in trying to resource funding and all the rest of it. So could you just give me a wee update on your fraud team, please?
Yes, Councillor. I can't give you too much information, but I can tell you that when we say fraud, we are talking about fraudulent applications, not necessarily by local individuals. The applications that we have received, I'm told that were fraudulent, are an organised fraudulent scheme that's operating throughout the whole of Scotland.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Member? Councillor Hadley.
Sorry, I've got the bins talking about the challenges of homeworking. I've got the bin men and the coalmen turning up simultaneously, so I may dissolve into barks and howls any second. It was just to observe, less of a question. Coming from a background of hotel work, there was a saying, never trust a thin chef. Excuse me, doggy. And I would say that listening to how you've responded to the COVID, you have provided an excellent example for all the businesses that are getting in touch with you as to how to adapt, how to respond to change, how to support others through. So if you were just to consider everything you've told us as a working model for how other businesses would be able to gain help and from your experience, I thought it was very impressive. And thank you very much for coming on to explain everything to us today. Thank you.
So, Danny, I think you've heard the positive responses from members, and it is, I can't stress it too highly, how pleased we are that the effort that's gone into making our business survive so that we can get to the end of this appalling pandemic. And just thank you very much for coming today. It's been very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, members. And I'm hoping that I can stay at the top of the ladder for a while and that I don't fall from grace very quickly. Thanks again.
No, I think we'll remember it for quite a while, so don't worry. Members, we now move to item 5 on the agenda, which is a presentation regarding the Badenoch Heritage Great Places project, which is a fantastic example of, I suppose, joined up thinking and interrelated working. So I don't know who's going to lead on this. Is it you, Karen, or is it Murray?
Oh, we're going to do a double act, I think. But I'll try and share my screen. I hope this works. I had a few glitches last time. Can you all see that? We
can indeed.
Okay, Murray, if you want to kick off, and then I'll pick up after you the first couple of slides.
Yes, that's great. Good morning, members. I hope you can hear me okay. Karen's going to show the slides, and I'm just going to start us off. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Well, thanks first of all for the invitation and your time today. That's much appreciated. Karen and I are giving a brief presentation and then be delighted to hear your questions. We're particularly keen to bring you up to date with some of the recent discussions we've been having with businesses and community members, and also with relevant land managers. And I'm pleased to say these have been really positive, and Karen will tell you more about that. But we're also keen to talk about the legacy of the project and what happens after it comes to an end, because the project really was all about embedding heritage in our ongoing activity. And I think we're all really keen to talk about what happens next. So just a brief reminder, I think I came to the area committee about 3 years ago when the project was just at the formation stage. And effectively, the project came out of a combination of challenges and opportunities. And the challenges were that the Badenoch area, and particularly some of the town centres, even at that time, were not exactly economically thriving. And there was a concern that with the ongoing work on the dualling of the A9, then that situation was going to get worse as time went on. And more positively, on the opportunity side, there was a lot of work had been done by community groups cataloguing and recording the heritage of the area, and it was felt that there was a huge resource there that was underexploited. And also there's very high profile heritage features, not least Ruthven Barracks, very visible from the A9. And of course there was tremendous centres of activity for heritage in the folk park and the Highland Wildlife Park. And a real feeling that they were getting lots of visitors to those destinations, which was great, but the overall benefit to the general Badenoch area, that part of the national park, could be much greater if we did some joint work. Now, at the time, we had just designated the area as a special priority area in the National Park Partnership Plan, and that had been signed off by ministers, so that was very fortuitous. And then at very short notice, an innovative funding scheme came along from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we managed to work really quickly and put an application in with partners, and we were chosen as one of the 9 places in Scotland, one of the great places where they were funding us to do the work. We got very well supported by partners. I'm pleased to say Highland Council were on board right from the very start, but we also got funding from Transport Scotland, Highlands Enterprise, Historic Environment Scotland, and a lot of input from local community groups like Badenoch Heritage. So Karen's put up the project aims that we set out with when we put in the funding bid there, and you'll see it's partly about developing a strong destination for visitors, but it's also, under aim 3, about involving local people in looking after our heritage. So it's partly about tourism, but it's about much more than that. And we always wanted, the CNPA was the accountable body for the money, but we always wanted the project to be very much community-led. And for that reason, we configured the project and the employment arrangements for the one project officer when the project started in very much with Karen, and Karen's the line manager of the project officer, and the project officer's always been located down in the Badenoch area. So I think at that point I'll hand on to Karen, and she'll tell you more about what we've been doing recently, talk about the legacy, and then we can answer any questions later on.
Okay, thank you, Murray. So I'm just really going to give a quick recap of where we were up to the end of last year, and then I'm going to show you some nice pictures, which I hope just represent all of the work and the products that have come out of the project to date. So this gives a really skeletal, but as you can imagine, there's loads of work behind each one of these items. But this gives a flavour of where the focus has been to date. So a lot of the work in the first year was looking at all of the sites, as Murray has identified. There are thousands of them, of cultural heritage sites in Badenoch. It's very rich for that, and so we were trying to whittle those down, which we did through an interpretation strategy, which also produced a marketing strategy, and we're continuing to take that work forward. The key things that have come out there are the brand, the website, festivals, a fantastic schools programme, which obviously is in abeyance at the moment, but we're hoping we might be able to pick some of that up later this year. We've got some renewed imagery of the area from professional photographers and drone footage, stories and music, mobile app, the augmented reality images, which actually have gone national through some of the newspapers and have received great acclaim, some tours, the ambassador programme, materials for marketing, and very importantly, a digital archive. So I just want to give you some, as I say, some flavour of each of those things that have come so far. One of the big things that came out of the marketing, the interpretation and the marketing strategy, was that Badenoch was very, very rich in stories. These are stories in terms of legends, but also stories of all the activity that has gone on in the past and continues to go on. So this ranges from stories of things that happened within the landscape, whether they're natural features, how people are working within the area and how that has affected the shape of Badenoch, through its music, its Gaelic, its Shinty, and many others. So stories, as we know, has become a very big thing in lots of parts of the world, including some very close to home. And so we were very lucky that we were able to, I think, nab this title and use this as part of our brand. And this has, as I say, come true really because stories are being told and are being shown as being an effective way to access heritage in our areas right across the world, actually. So Badenoch the Storylands is the brand that we're taking forward. It is a very strong brand, I think, because it's very identifiable within the Cairngorm National Park. It's based on cultural heritage, and it shows that stories are what is different about Badenoch and as I say, can help us to access the fantastic cultural heritage There have been 2 festivals. There were festivals down in Badenoch before the project started. So Kinusi Festival was very well established, had been going for many, many years, and continues to feed into the work of the Badenoch Heritage Festival. Some of you will also know Lagan Heritage is a long-established group, and they have been doing festivals as well. But they have come together, all the 5 communities, to focus on creating a really good heritage festival for the area that will showcase the best it has to offer to locals, nationals, and an international audience as well. So this kicked off in 2019, over 2 weeks with 60-odd events. And this past year in September 2020, it went on ahead online, just as a week with 5 events, but that was very well received. We had just under 400 people attended those, and they again were from international. That's the beauty of Zoom, I suppose, is that we can get to international audiences very, very easily. But there was a fine content in all of those things, and the planning is going ahead already now for the Festival 2021, which again will be in September. So I hope you'll all manage to access some of that, get into some of that. 2 of the very big things that are really important and central in terms of helping people, certainly who don't live in the area, to access the cultural heritage and the stories that we're putting forward, are through the mobile app and the website. I'll talk a bit more about the app in a minute, but the website, as you can see there, is at www.badenochstorylands.com, and that is a very active site. It's got an interactive map and loads of information, and that's reflected in the app as well. We've done some good synergy there between the 2, so that they complement each other and give similar information. But the app, which I will talk about in a moment, has a lot of features on it. One of them is the tours. Some of we've struggled to find a word that really identifies what this is. I think we've settled on tours, but it has previously been called routes and itineraries. But we have developed to date, as you can see from the map, 13 tours. 2 of them are driving tours, South Badenoch and North Badenoch. There are 3 cycling tours and 8 walking tours. And we're at the moment trying to work out the most efficient way to reflect all of that information through mapping and making sure that obviously you have an overall map there which shows a huge number of a huge lot of information, including all of the numbers that you can see there from 1 up to 70, which show the sites of interest and where they're located. So we've taken all of that information and put it into these tours so that people can access them and hear stories and just find out some information. And we will continue to work on those. We've got other tours that are in preparation at the moment. So just referring to the app, this is an example. This is obviously in beta format at the moment, so there's a lot of work still to do, but we're hoping to launch the app in April. Just about Easter time. It'll be quite tight, but this is what we're going for. And this gives an example to you of one of the cycling routes, which is the Relais Circular. And the 3 screens you can see in front of you just give a flavour of the kind of information that somebody who wants to take this tour can get from the app. And of course, they can have it when they're here in Badenoch, but they can also armchair browse from wherever they are in the world and just see what's on offer and get some information. So the left-hand screen shows you where the tour route is. That obviously can be broken down to give a bigger map, bigger scale map, so people know where they're going. And also in the middle screen, you can see the different points of interest or destinations which are numbered, and for each one of those. So, for example, the history and the heritage at Invernahaven is listed in more detail on the right-hand screen. Also on the app, there you can see a whole load of points of interest. It's a very intuitive piece of work. This has been done by Whereverly, and this has mostly been funded by one of our partners, Transport Scotland, and we're very grateful for that because it's created a huge boost to the project in terms of, as I say, accessibility for members of the public. So it can list all of the different things. It gives a load of information, and the screen that I declined to show you because I thought I wouldn't have time, but also there's a lot of other background information. So Danny was talking about businesses earlier. So we've asked all the businesses in Badenoch to sign up, and that's in progress at the moment, where they can list their business as well on the site. So people can find out where to eat, where to get petrol, where they can go to the toilet, where they can park, where they can stay, where they can visit other attractions, of which, you know, there are many in Badenoch. So it's a very good all-encompassing app, and we're quite excited about it. I just mentioned imagery, and so we have, as I say, refreshed. There's a lot of fantastic photography, not least because it's a fantastic landscape in Badenoch. But we have commissioned a well-known local photographer to do some great new shots, which particularly reflect the sites of interest that we're promoting, but also get some drone footage of these so that people we can get fly-throughs, which also will be on the app and on the website. Augmented reality, I mentioned these. There are 6 of those that we've commissioned 7. There are 6 that have already been completed of the various sites. The 2 that you're looking at on the screen here on the left is Tor Alvi, which most people don't realise that there is probably an Iron Age, possibly Pictish hill fort on the top. Most people know it for the Duke of Gordon monument that cuts right through this site, but this helps people to, and this will be part of the marketing works and interpretation that goes on site so people can see what they're looking at. The one on the right is Ruthven Barracks as it stood at the time of Culloden, and we've also commissioned Ruthven Barracks at the time of the Wolf of Badenoch, so that's in the 14th century, which will, again, you know, Murray mentioned that it's the most iconic site, it's the most visible one from the A9, so there's a whole lot of storytelling to do behind that, and the visual imagery will help with all of that. So finally, we're in 2021. The project was due to finish in December 2020, but happily we've got an extension. As we know, COVID has also been given an extension, unfortunately. So we were hoping this year that we would catch up, particularly in the summer months, to do a whole load of work with schools and with visitors and with the community at large. This is looking as if it might also be a bit affected, but we're hoping to get through most of these activities as much as we can. So as Murray mentioned, we've had some strong engagement in previous weeks, particularly with the community and businesses. We did a couple of events a couple of weeks ago, which were well attended, and all the information was well received. And we've also been working hard with landowners, particularly those that have got the sites of interest on them where there may be increased footfall, because obviously we want to make sure that people act responsibly, work within the outdoor access code, and the landowners are happy with the project as it's been put forward. We will continue to work on interpretation and marketing. The app, as I say, will be launched in April. There are talks and walks programs that certainly the talks, there's some winter talks that are being promoted now that are being done through Badenoch Heritage, but that will continue through, and we hope we'll get some walks programs in the summer, but as I say, we'll have to see. There will be some farm visits for the tourist trade that will be run probably by CBP to help promote the area and all of the work that we've been doing. Our skills building programme has always been central to the work that we've done with communities through the Ambassador programme, but also with the schools, and we're keeping a watching eye on that to make sure that we can try and get in and help put cultural heritage skills development into schools programmes. We're working with the teachers to see how we can do that and bring in some experts to help the more senior pupils in community high to see if there are careers that they can build through cultural heritage, but anyway, just generate some interest there. As Murray mentioned, legacy planning is crucial. We're well into that now, but we clearly, when the project leaves the area at the end of October, there needs to be a strong embedding of legacy within the community so that our local organisations and community members are keen to take that forward. Part of that will be the creation of a digital archive. We're working with Highland now through Ambaya and looking to create a contract there so that all of the work that we've been doing, all of the imagery, but all of the stories, all of the recordings, the music, etc., from local people and elsewhere can be captured and kept for the public to access. We're looking at developing resource packs for businesses so that they can sell Storylands and be confident about that, and also ambassadors. And ambassadors, by that I mean people generally in the community. So anybody who has an interest in it and can promote it and talk about it warmly and with passion to people who come and visit. And finally, our Heritage Festival and celebration, which will round off the project. That's going to be towards the end of September, and those I hope you will all attend. So that's the festival week is 18th to the 25th, and the celebration is Saturday the 25th. That'll be a full day. So that's the end of that, and I will try to stop sharing now. Okay, have I done that?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. How can I do that? Beg your pardon. Let me stop share then. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Karen, to be quite honest, if we can't encourage people to come to Badenoch after a presentation like this, then I don't know what else we can do. And really, this should be a plan for other areas across Highland. And maybe even especially the northern part of Strathspey, we should do something like this in the future. There are many small places that could benefit from something like this. So any questions, members? Muriel.
Thank you both for an excellent update, and it's actually nice to have something so positive and to see the growth, which is just unbelievable. A couple of observations. In a bizarre sort of way, COVID, has it helped with the online delivery and greater interest online? I think that's something that possibly should be kept at the forefront, because we're going to be in COVID restrictions, I think, the rest of this year at least. So I think I'm keen that we don't lose out in any of the digital marketing and accessibility, particularly internationally. I think that's important. The schools programme I'm really intrigued in. If you won't be able to get into schools, obviously, can you get into schools digitally? I'm thinking of a presentation at some of the assemblies, because some of our schools are doing assemblies with the whole school there. So I think particularly before the summer, most people would be staying at home, and I think it would be an opportunity for little projects for the young people to take mum and dad in their own locality to all these exciting things. So I just wondered about that. The other thing is that the walks I'm fascinated about. As you know, I'm a great champion of the green health. Are we teaming up with our green health colleagues and making accessibility for them? Because some of these people will be your fantastic ambassadors too, and will have those local things, because I do think we're all proud to be ambassadors for whatever thing we participate in, and believe it or not, I'm still proud to be an ambassador for Glasgow, so for many years. So I think it is important that we capitalise and nurture that as well. But thank you.
Karen and Murray, there's a couple of questions there. One of you like to maybe respond?
I'm happy to, Murray, thank you. So yes, certainly we've been working very hard. The online has been a blessing in lots of ways, curse in some, but blessing in others, as we know. So we have managed to do quite a lot, and actually developed great skills and rapport with other organisations. So we're working with Expo North, which is backed by High, to put as much online as we can. So definitely that's helped us to extend our audience. I think that's right, Muriel. In terms of the schools, some of the things that we were planning to do can only be done hands-on. It's when you're talking about archaeology or developing cultural heritage skills, much of it needs to be actually face-to-face and in the field. But we're looking to see how we can bring people in, experts in, especially in the more creative areas around music making and storytelling and things like this. So we'll be able to do some of those, and we're hoping that maybe some of the more hands-on stuff can still happen, but probably likely, I don't know, to be when the schools go back in the autumn rather than prior to the holiday period. And you mentioned green health and the walks. So again, we're hoping that we get the protocols in place to some of the walks, but definitely we're working with Ailsa Villegas and her team and the Green Health Partnership here in Badenoch, and we will make sure that all of that is, as bonded together as possibly can be. I meant to mention, sorry, also that we're working very closely with the Spirit, as it's called, I think, colloquially, Spirit of the Highlands project, with the castle and the team there who are working on stories as well. So we're working with that Highland Council initiative in terms of bringing stories from Badenoch into that project, and our storyteller Hamish Napier is working with them very closely. Sorry, I meant to mention that before.
Just briefly to add to what Karen said there, I think she summarised it extremely well. But I think that point about the legacy of the project, and particularly building it into the Spirit of the Highlands work and the Inverness Castle work, we think all of the work we've done has really positioned Badenoch well, as long as we can make the appropriate connections now to be well placed to bed into those projects. And also, you'll know that the next year is the themed year of Scottish storytelling, or Scottish Year of Stories, and again we think that Badenoch should be now positioned extremely well, and this is where we need Highland Council's political support and weight to make sure that we're carrying forward the legacy of the project. Lastly, that point Karen made about working with Expo North and High, they've already identified that they say there's a real sweet spot for interest in heritage, digital technology and innovation. And this is where I think there is a real opportunity for young people in the area. At face value, they might not think they want a job associated with heritage, but when you dig into it, that's often a job about doing, new creation, new visual illustrations, new websites, new marketing initiatives. There's absolutely a fantastic prospect of new skills and job opportunities through this project.
Councillor Hadley.
I've had first sight of a lot of this, being on the board and also being a member of Kingussie population, if you like. So I won't question so much as observe that the recent meetings that you had involving the locals in Kingussie and the local businesses clearly demonstrated that you'd achieved your aim of involving the community and getting others on board. But from a personal perspective, it was interesting looking at the app and all of the areas on the app that, even as somebody that was raised in Kingussie, who had the privilege of having the excellent historian David Taylor as her history teacher, so therefore access to far more information than most people, that it is only through my involvement on this board that certain treasures have come to my awareness that I have walked past on a daily basis almost. An innocuous looking raised area just the other side of the Tom Barrow Woods, 10 minutes where I walk my dogs, transpires it's an Iron Age settlement, a building. And all of these things that are there in front of us that we haven't had awareness of, just to be able to walk around with this app, to be able to see and delve into the history of areas that, short of bringing David Taylor on a walk or Eve Boyle from Historic Scotland on a walk with me, I would have no idea. And it's heartening to think that the hidden history is going to come to life, not just for visitors, but for those who live here, from this unique and outstanding project. And I've been really, really privileged to be part of it. And I'm really looking forward to be able to stay local, stay safe, and still be able to explore new and wonderful things that I've been totally unaware of all my time I've lived here. Thank you so much.
Councillor Bruce. Oh, welcome,
Thank
John,
you.
by the way. We missed you at the start, but I'm glad to see you're here, and you haven't turned into a teenage mutant ninja turtle. So
Not yet, not yet. You never know what might happen. That was a very impressive presentation. Thank you very much, Karen and Murray. Have you got the accommodation providers on side with you, with all the literature that you're going to be producing and making it easy. Unfortunately, we don't have quite so many tourist visitor outlet shops as we had, but it's having it all in all the hotels, caravan sites, bunkhouses, everything.
Yeah, that was the purpose of the two events that we had just recently, was to try and get these people on board, and we got Mark Tate, the chief executive of the Cairngorms Business Partnership, to chair those events, and I think that worked extremely well. Mark was an absolutely excellent chair, and his enthusiasm for the project, I think, made a lot of difference. And obviously, it's a very difficult time for the tourism industry right now. But again, we think we're well positioned. Again, I think this is where, you know, we're all acutely aware of the pressures there is on some parts of the park and other parts of the Highlands at Glenmore and whatnot. And this is where it's really important that we're investing and seen to be investing in the quieter areas of the park, because these are areas that we can preferentially try and attract visitors to. You know, it will benefit the visitors, it will benefit the COVID situation, and it will of course benefit the businesses as well.
I think that's a very good point, Murray, because really some of the remoter parts of Badenoch and Strathspey have not been as successful in previous years. And we need to spread the overall success that Badenoch and Strathspey has into the remoter corners. And I think, as Pippa mentions, and unless you go to this app, many of us, in fact, almost all of us, wouldn't recognise some of these really important places. That I think it's fantastic. So really, yeah, I think this is a wonderful project, and really thank you very much for coming today. It's been really good to hear, and we'll hopefully, as things progress, maybe next year we'll hear even more. So John, your hand's still up. Is that an old hand?
No, sorry, I'll take it down.
Okay. So Murray and Karen, thanks very much, and you're welcome to stay if you wish, but yep. I appreciate you may have better things to go to sleep over. So.
Okay, many thanks. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, we move now to item 6, which is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Performance Report. I don't know if we do have, we actually have Roddy Chapman here. I've just seen him appear on my screen somewhere. So without further ado, I'll just pass to you, Roddy.
No worries. Morning, Chair. Morning, members. I'm Roddy Chapman, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, Station Commander for Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey, presenting on behalf of Derek Wilson, the local Senior Officer for Highland. Thank you for inviting me along today to update you on the local key priorities as identified in the footer page 2 of the performance report. If I can refer you to the 3rd page of the performance report headed All Accidental Dwelling Fires, you will notice that this figure has increased from the previous year with one incident of this type in the reporting period. It is to be noted that fires of this type have increased across Scotland for the same period, and this incident can be attributed to cooking, and there was no smoke or fire damage to the property. The incident that occurred was unfortunate, but it was avoidable. Our local managers and crews are committed to driving and keeping down incidents of this type and continue to offer home fire safety visits in partnership with other agencies, particularly targeting those that are high and very high risk. As needed, we continue to undertake post-domestic incident response activities as a means of targeting home fire safety visits and raising fire safety awareness after dwelling fires within the community, and to show visible support to those affected by these incidents. Thankfully, there will be no fire fatalities as illustrated on page 4, and page 5 also reporting there have been 0 fire casualties. The figures for deliberate fires as detailed on page 6 of the report has increased on the previous year, with the reporting period being comparable with 2018-19. Although still low, there was a large increase in the previous quarter, which can be attributed to COVID-19 and increased levels of public activity in the outdoors. The figures on page 7 relate to special service RTCs and show a reduction against Q3 figures in previous years. The number of incidents of this type continues to remain low, which is encouraging, but the service will continue to work with partners to educate the public on road safety matters. The figures for false alarms, or UFAS, as shown on page 8 of the report for the same period in previous years, and are lower for the same period in previous years, and a number of these have been repeated attendances at premises where buildings are unoccupied or have reduced staffing due to ongoing COVID working restrictions. Prevention and protection have now recommenced legislative auditing of premises and will continue to work with businesses to reduce unwanted alarms. The local managers regularly engage with premises and business owners to continue to try and prevent these incidents from occurring. Finally, station availability. So page 9 of the report details our availability and the current establishment figures across the district. These figures again reflect the commitment of our staff in providing emergency response throughout the area. There are recognised ongoing challenges surrounding recruitment and retention. However, this has been addressed at both a local and national level. And during the pandemic, all stations have demonstrated excellent resilience. So many thanks for your attention and time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take these now.
Well, it's really good to see the overall low figures that are in the report. But the one that really worries me is the massive increase in deliberate fires in July and August last year. Yes. You know, this coming summer, the pressure on our tourist areas is just going to increase, and the effects of so-called wild camping will continue to be a problem. You know, this year we were quite lucky to get away without a major forest fire caused by one of these, I suppose, I'm not going to say the word, but I simply don't know what we can do about it. We can monitor it and we can react to it, but we need to try and encourage people to act responsibly. And I'm sure you've got enough to do without coming out in the middle of the night to Glenmore or anywhere else to put out a campfire.
Yes, I think I was speaking to Group Commander Neil McLennan earlier on in the late last month about this very matter that you're talking about. Neil's in charge of prevention and protection for the Highland. He was asking for me for contact details of Forestry Land Scotland and the National Park, because he's wanting to set up a partnership working to kind of look into this and plan for, I would suggest, the inevitable influx of people again due to kind of national and international travel restrictions. So we are kind of looking at that, or Neil as the group commander has been addressing that with the local businesses or landowners.
There's a Coburn.
Thank you very much for the update. Just in the back of the Councillor Robin's question there about last summer, I think it's imperative that any support that we can give with the encouraging closer working relationships with the National Park to work together, because I think we need a joint up strategy for forthcoming. So hopefully we will be able to support and help in that instance. One question I've got following your presentation was recruitment and retention. Are you, as an organisation, noticing any increased interest, because we've got more people on furlough in the area that are looking for other avenues to explore? Have you noticed any uptake or increased interest?
Yeah, within Badenoch and Strathspey, I have noticed that a number of applicants are currently unemployed. Whether or not that is due to COVID-19 or not, I haven't been able to ascertain that. But I wouldn't necessarily say there's been a huge increase in that. Nationally, I couldn't comment, but there have been a few instances where people are not working whatsoever, where normally I would expect people to be applying for the fire service as a secondary employment, but in this instance it seems to be some number are applying as primary employment. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
It seems we're all thinking alike with regard to communications with the CMPA and access officers over the wildfires. There was just something, rather than repeat what everybody else has said, and you've obviously indicated you're already there and doing that. Is there anything that you've looked at with regard to responsible reporting? Because I'm aware that a lot of the reports of the wildfires came from the Glenmore webcams that people were using, and then just obviously getting quite het up about the disregard of safety for our environment that was being shown. But I'm also aware that part of the work that's gone on has been to redistribute the visitors into more manageable areas, taking into account, those areas that aren't overwhelmed, and they then will become subject to the same problems that Glenmore and surrounding area has faced, and in that without that vigilante ability of those to be able to observe and look after their area because there are no accompanying webcams. So is there any work that's been going on, or is this on your radar, for responsible reporting with the public, getting them to understand how to respond, the numbers to call and when to respond to avoid sort of flooding the system with calls?
I think it maybe ties back into the my original point to Councillor Lobbin there about the Group Commander McLennan getting together with other partners to, and I think this maybe would encompass that, it's to raise awareness of the expectation of the landowners, of the local businesses, as how people are to act. I know Councillor Lobbin referred to wild campers. I think it's the dirty campers is the reference to the phrase that gets used, rather than the and it's people just turning up and unloading the boot of their car and just using the ground as they want, as opposed to wild campers who take everything with them, and that classic leave nothing but a footprint. Regarding the reporting mechanisms, I'm unaware of anything that's going to be developed, but I'd imagine through the awareness campaign, the irresponsible behaviour would be encouraged to be reported. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
No worries.
Any further questions, members? Roddy, thanks very much for coming today. It's really good, and this is always a very interesting report. And hopefully by the time we get to a similar report later on in the year, that this June and July and August period will have gone without incident, and we can only hope. But certainly, Councillor Hadley makes a very good point. If we attempt to stop people from camping around the Glenmore area, they will just go somewhere else. But really, thanks very much for your time today. And again, you're more than welcome to stay if you wish.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. Cheerio. I'll see you later.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheerio.
Members, we now move to item 7, which is the Town Centre Fund. And before we look at any of these, if any of these require any planning matters, then we are not commenting on planning. We are purely deciding on the financial viability of these applications. So I don't think there are any planning matters, but Alan, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. As the Chair alludes to, I do not think there are any planning matters with any of these proposals, not that I'm aware of at this time anyway. I do not propose to spend any length of time on the background to this fund. I think we've discussed this at great length during more business meetings, etc. I think we're all very comfortable with the objectives of the fund. I will just clarify a couple of key points before we get stuck into the proposals received, though, just to confirm that your committee area has £112,208 to invest. There are 4 eligible settlements, the same as the last time with the first tranche of Town Centre Fund. That is Aviemore, Granton-on-Spey, Kingussie and Newton Moor. The objectives of the fund are slightly different to the first tranche. This second tranche is part of the Scottish Government's National Economic Stimulus Package. So therefore, a lot of the strategic objectives of the first tranche have been dropped. And the key driver this time round is to stimulate local construction activity and support employment across these eligible settlements. And because it's part of the National Economic Stimulus Package, there are very tight timescales attached to it. And those are, we need to have the funds committed by the end of March and spent by the end of September. You'll remember late last year, you wished to see an open call for projects, again, as you did with the first tranche. So we duly did that. We opened it up on the 26th of November, inviting bids, and that closed on the 6th of January in order to prepare this paper. So in total, we had 7 eligible proposals, and the total grant amount requested was £112,724. Now, I've appended all the detailed proposals. So again, I don't intend to read through all those. I think you're all very familiar with the projects. Many are Tranche 1 TCF 1920 grantees. So I think the projects are established. I think we're all very familiar with them. So without further ado, I'll just start running through the projects bids themselves. The first one being Aviemore Village Green. Again, a project we're familiar with given it's an existing TCF grantee. Essentially, Aviemore Community Enterprise are seeking another £29,300 to carry out further landscaping works to the village green, essentially to complement our first phase of works. And what we're talking about there is the resurfacing of paths, an access ramp, and some new stone-built seating in the green. I have no issues with eligibility or deliverability in terms of that project. So without any further, I don't have anything else to say on that project. I'll move, if you're happy, Chair, will I just run through all the projects?
Just run through them all, Alan, and any questions, we'll take them at the end.
No worries. So the next one is Aviemore War Memorial. Again, Legion Scotland, the Aviemore branch, are seeking 24,504 to carry out environmental improvements to the War Memorial site. You'll see in paragraph 6.5, I've bullet pointed those. No issues in terms of treating them as a total package in terms of eligibility or deliverability. However, if you were to strip out individual items, you could say that the sculpture and the wreath stand would have a negligible impact on the primary aim of supporting the construction sector if they were to be handled as standalone items. But in their totality, I have no issues with that particular project. Granton Square, a very straightforward bid there from the Granton Initiative. They're seeking 7,570 for the supply and installation of new electrical ducting and cabling to replace the existing faulty network in the square. And the whole ethos behind that project is essentially to stimulate greater use of the space for outdoor events. I know there's current markets take place there, so in essence it's to enhance that and potentially provide a catalyst for more outdoor events taking place, as I say. No issues in terms of eligibility or deliverability with that one. The next one, Caberfay Horizons in Kingussie. Again, a 1920 project that we're all knowledgeable on. Caberfay Horizons are seeking a further 23,000 to carry out further physical improvements to the community hub. I've had to remove 1,000 from that. Basically, they included £1,000 worth of ineligible maintenance works, so essentially repairs to the rainwater goods. That's deemed to be revenue and ineligible. So that project's currently sitting at 22k, and essentially what we're talking about there is a new front door and replacement of 8 windows. No issues with eligibility or deliverability with that element of the project. Moving to Kingussie, we have the Gynack Gardens. Kingussie Community Development Company are seeking 10,350 to carry out further environmental improvements to the garden. Again, you'll be aware that they are an existing TCF grantee. This is a suite of further public realm amenity improvements to the gardens. I've listed all the various elements to the project. There is a breakdown of funding within the appendix. Again, a wee bit like the War Memorial one, if you were to strip out individual items, you could argue that they have a negligible impact on the primary aim of the TCF in terms of stimulating the construction sector if they're handled as standalone. When you look at them in their totality, I wouldn't personally have a significant issue with eligibility, and there's no concerns about deliverability on that project. A couple more left. Market Stance Playing Field in Kingussie, a project I think members are well cited on given the asset transfer that's taking place there. Kingussie Camanachd Club are seeking 10,000 towards a 96,000 project to upgrade the Market Stance Playing Field. As I say, you'll be familiar with the project and what the issues there are. Essentially, they're looking for TCF to fence the boundary, install floodlights and do some groundworks to the site. No eligibility or deliverability concerns with the project whatsoever. And the final one, Newtonmore War Memorial. Again, a small project there. Newtonmore Business Association seeking 8,000, putting in £1,000 of their own money to improve accessibility to the War Memorial by carrying out improvement to the path network in and around it. And again, no deliverability or eligibility issues there. I think that concludes all the projects, Chair.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks very much for the amount of work that you've put into getting this to an acceptable stage. You know, this Scottish Government funding is very welcome, and these projects will make a difference, there's no doubt about it. But hopefully there will be more funding coming forward. So I would like to advise all our communities to get their projects shovel ready, so that if there is more funding that becomes available, that they have a project that's sitting there ready to go, and we're not looking at projects that would be absolutely fantastic, but we would consider them undeliverable in the timescale. So I'm really pleased to see this yet again. Members, have you any comments? No, we're all quite happy by the looks of it. No, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, I think it's important to get the message across to communities that they need to have stuff ready should this come again. But I think we need to acknowledge the amount of work you as leading this up for the diligence and the scrutiny that you do, and it's not just our area that you've got to deal with. So a personal thank you for steering us through all this.
I see. It doesn't deal just with our area, Muriel, but our area is the best area, as he already knows. Councillor Booth.
Absolutely.
Thank you. With this, are we getting support from community councils? I'm thinking, you know, you're doing gardens and things, the continuing maintenance of the gardens and this sort of thing. Where will that be coming from?
Well, that's not actually part of these projects, John. You know, these are for new capital projects.
Right.
Councillor Hadley.
I just thought it would be rude not to pop up and say thanks, Alan. You've been absolutely awesome with all the help and advice and work that you've done on this with us. Thank you.
And they don't tell you that in Lochaber or Inverness.
No comment, Chair.
And almost all the money is fully committed. So, and I don't think there are any deliverability issues with any of the projects. So I don't actually think we need to have any reserve projects, such as the small amount of money that remains, because that is part of the recommendation, is to agree and rank any reserve projects.
I suppose on that point, Chair, is, you know, there will be an element of tendering required with some of these projects, and I suppose that catch-all is in the event that maybe it's unlikely that a project does not proceed because they have insufficient budget. You know, tenders come in higher, but the reality is, you know, I don't think we're going to be facing that, Chair, with these particular projects. I think we'll be able to work. Council officers will be able to work with each of the individual grantees, either to modify the scope or, you know, to make tweaks necessary to deliver the project outcomes as we anticipate with the available budget, as we've done in previous years.
That's good. Okay, with that, members, there are two recommendations. I'd ask you to agree to the recommendations, please. Alan, thanks very much. You can go down now and lie down in a dark room and think about what's going to happen in Inverness.
Thanks very much, members.
Cheers, Alan. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Members, the next item is item 8 on our agenda, which is the housing revenue account garage rents. And I believe we have one Sandra McLennan here this morning who will lead us through this.
Thank you, Convener.
Over to you.
Members, this is the annual garage report asking members to consider rent levels for housing revenue account garages across Badenoch and Strathspey for 2021-22. Small numbers of garages in Badenoch and Strathspey area. Section 5 of the report sets out the current levels of rents and the proportion of tenancies that are council tenancies and non-council tenants. Since writing the report, I confirm that 2% general increase for council houses was agreed at Housing and Property Committee on the 27th of January. At table 6.2, I've detailed the rent levels with a 2% increase, and I've also provided members with details on rent levels for a 1%, 2% and 3% increase at Appendix 1. Thank you, Convener.
Sandra, you confused me a wee bit on page 14, and it says there are no garage sites in Badenoch and Strathspey. So I kind of assumed that was maybe a bit of a typo or something.
No, there's two sets. There's garage lockups, which are in Badenoch and Strathspey, but there are also garage sites across Highland where the tenant builds their own garage on the site, but we don't have any sites across Badenoch and Strathspey.
Okay, from my own personal point of view, I would actually prefer to see larger increases in charges to non-council tenants than we see for council tenants. You know, I presume we originally built these garages for our own tenants, and now they're not owned by our tenants because obviously probably the property has changed hands. So I think it's important that we keep keep in mind, maybe for the future, that we keep the rises to our own tenants to a minimum. Any comments, members? Councillor Coburn.
I think that's a very important point, actually. I think we must, or we should consider minimising our own tenants, but I think we need to reflect our non-tenants that have these garages and how we get reimbursement and the increase of reimbursement.
Maybe just to add there, convener, that we do prioritise any vacant garages that come up. Our council tenants get priority. That was a change in policy that was agreed at committee 2 years ago.
Okay, members, can we agree the increase of 2%?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agreed. Members, we move now on to item 9, and it's Sandra again, which is the Housing Performance Report. Sandra.
Yes, members, the regular Housing Performance Report, this one reporting housing performance at Q3, so that's to December 2020. I'm really pleased to present another positive report for Badenoch and Strathspey members. I don't intend to go through the report. There's a couple of updates relating to the current lockdown. The repair service is currently, we're focusing on emergency and high priority repairs. Non-emergency repairs are being logged, and we'll deal with those as soon as it's possible to do so. I anticipate an impact on non-emergency repairs performance next quarter. In terms of relets, we're operating full service in relation to voids and also allocation of properties, so full service there. I do anticipate going forward that we may see an impact on performance due to temporary suspension of some services and additional measures that we've have to put in place to deal with COVID. In terms of the report, there's one red indicator on Appendix 1. That's the percentage of tenancies sustained for more than 1 year. We had 2 tenancies, one abandoned tenancy and one tenant who moved out of the area. I'm happy to take any questions about the report, members.
Sandra, as per usual, the only thing that concerns me with the figures in this report is the, I suppose, the continuing increase in rent arrears. And I know we're doing a fantastic job to try and mitigate it, etc. But, you know, we've got people now who are receiving benefits who have never had benefits in their life before and are really struggling. And COVID has made it worse, I would imagine. And so really we need to do whatever we can to try and minimise this, and I know we are. But I also realise that for our maintenance staff, it's a very difficult period with COVID. So I think they deserve a bit of credit too. I think they're doing a fantastic job under very, very difficult circumstances. Councillor Coburn.
Sandra, as ever, thank you to you and the team. Just in light of the increase that we saw for universal credit at our last COVID briefing last week, I think the area has gone up to 203% in a few months. I'm really worried about the impact that has on the potential for an increase in rent arrears, and I presume that you're working closely with the benefit teams here, because we've got that. We've got the I've been contacted by a few people that are struggling with fuel costs as well, because the fuel costs have gone up. We've got another increase in heating going in April and things like that. So how do we manage all this? Because it's becoming, I think, a serious, an even more serious issue as well. And I think it's important that we're cited on this, and you've got support, whatever you need.
Maybe just to update on that, Councillor Coburn, we have got a rent arrears working group which are focusing on how best we contact tenants at an early stage. So they're looking at the more policy and procedure role. There'll be an update going to Housing and Property Committee on the work of that group, so that'll inform members of some of the work that we're doing in the background. Pleased to say that we've managed to get a new post for Badenoch and Strathspey, a housing management assistant, who will assist in contacting tenants and helping the housing management officer to do that. Hopefully that goes out to recruitment next week. So certainly in terms of staffing resource, that'll help. The team are really proactive in Badenoch, and they do contact all their tenants, either in arrears or whether they think they need any welfare advice. So confident that that's happening in Badenoch and Strathspey area.
Councillor Hadley.
I may be whining in the background, but I promise it's not me. I had an observation and a question, and the observation is first that obviously as a council house tenant, I have had experience of your emergency repairs hotline and the ability of the operator to be able to reassure, explain and give me full understanding of what to expect of a service through the COVID thing. It was admirable. You know, I had absolutely no idea when I started, and by the time I finished the phone conversation, I was thoroughly satisfied with the information. And it was just to applaud them on being able to deal with public members so well. And then the second question was with regard to the allocations. I can see that as per Scottish Government guidelines, they're continuing, but I just wanted to ask, is it business as usual, or have there been a marked sort of impact on the reallocation service as you've seen it?
Yeah, so answering the question about emergency repairs hotline, that's really good to get positive feedback on that service, and I'll pass that on to, it's Aberdeen that cover that service for us, but I'll pass that information on. Allocations, we have got additional steps in place to deal with allocation around safe viewing of properties, leases, etc. So there are more steps involved in allocation than we would normally have pre-COVID. So yeah, and it is taking longer to deal with allocations as a result of that, but we are proactively dealing with all voids and allocations at the moment.
Thank you.
Any further questions, members, for Sandra? Sandra, again, thanks very much for coming. Good report as ever, and just keep an eye on those, the fact that people are really struggling at the moment. So it's really important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Cheers, Sandra. Remember, item 10 on our agenda is the Kingussie and Granton and Spey Common Good Funds, and Sarah Murdoch, I believe, is here to give us a few words of wisdom. Sarah.
I am indeed. Good morning, members. Yes, you have a report before you on both the Kingussie and the Granton Common Good Funds. It's quite a detailed report, so I don't propose to go through it in over again and repeat everything that's in there. One of the main things that we're doing is we're asking to go out to consultation on the asset register that we've proposed a list of property for in respect of Kingussie. I'd just like to mention from the outset that investigations are still ongoing with regard to Granton. Obviously, it takes time to go through all the deeds and things like that we've got and identify property that we put into our list of proposed properties. So initially I thought there might be some merit in delaying Kingussie to be able to go out jointly on Kingussie and Granton at the same time, but it now seems there might be merit in going out on Kingussie alone. And then when we're in a position to do so on Granton, we'll repeat the process with regard to Granton. The report that's before you, members, details the position in respect of both funds. As you're aware, there are existing funds in the Badenoch and Strathspey area. Until recently, we had not included any actual property within those funds. When we published our existing asset registers in February 2020 for the other Highland funds, we'd been under quite a bit of pressure to get those done and get them in the public domain. So we went with what we knew did have property in there, on the understanding that we knew that there were other funds that would need a bit more investigation to look into, and we knew that somewhere in Kingussie and Granton there would be something. It just would take a bit of working out how it had been classified and why we weren't aware of it immediately. So now that those for the other funds have been published and are on the website and are up and running in accordance with the Community Empowerment Act, it's given us time to investigate the other funds in the area, and Badenoch and Strathspey are the funds that some of the ones that we've been investigating. In respect of Kingussie, attached to that report that's before you, members, is a list of the property that we're proposing to go out to consultation on. That's attached at Appendix 1. That may or may not be the complete list of common good property, and this is where we're hoping that we'll get some feedback from members of the community. This is what I've been able to identify so far from information that we hold in our deeds at Highland Council, from checking on our resources that we have at Highland Council and investigating obvious areas. There may be some areas of property that are not included in that list, and they will have been discounted for whatever reason, either because they've come into the ownership of the Highland Council after the boroughs were abolished in 1975, or because they're held in a different way. But part of what the consultation is to do is to try and tease out from those people in the community that hopefully have got knowledge on the ground that there might be some areas that are not included in there that we need to look at, we need to investigate, and we need to potentially include. Within that report, I've given a wee bit of background. Kingussie is what's known as a borough of barony. It classifies as one of the smaller boroughs as far as the borough system is concerned. So you have your royal boroughs, of which we have a number in the Highlands. You have your boroughs of barony, of which Kingussie is one. And I've also mentioned there that Granton is categorised as a borough of regality. I mean, who knew there were so many different forms of borough? But there are. But as far as we're concerned, they're all important because they all have the potential for common good. There's no real clear definition of common good property, which is why it can often cause so much uncertainty as to what may or may not be common good property, and it can often take a little bit of digging and assessment to come up with what we think is common good property. We have some indications in case law that help us to identify the property, and we apply a number of techniques to dig around either in the deeds or information that's come in from borough minutes, things that we might find in historical sites on the web. There's often all sorts of sources that we use to identify whether something may or may not be common good. I've included an indication of the two processes that are important for common good process. The first and most important initially is the setting up of the asset register. That's contained in section 102 of the Community Empowerment Act. The normal statutory provision is to allow 12 weeks public consultation, but we need to take on board the fact that these are not usual times. So we've been adding on an additional 4 weeks to our consultation period, which would take this up to a 16-week public consultation period. But also, the asset register is a living document. It's something that can be added to. And I know that even within 16 weeks, there may be certain facilities that are not open for members of the community to access who might want to go and do some investigations themselves. So in many respects, the important thing would be to get the register as we can identify it within the consultation period, published and operating so that we can reactivate Kingussie Common Good Fund. And then if any other property is identified and does come in and people do send information in after that fact, we can assess that after the event, and the register can always be amended and added to. It's very much that type of document. It's not to be seen as a one-off and you only get one shot at it. It can be amended and it is to be regularly reviewed. So that's an assurance that quite often certain members of the community have needed. We're running a similar consultation at the moment in the Wick area, and the Community Council in particular needed that assurance that they weren't going to run out of time just because the consultation was coming to an end. So we do offer that assurance. Although the consultation will run for a period, the document can evolve over time as well. I also included in this one the provision for disposing or changing the use of a common good property. And this is because in Kingussie there's the pertinent to the Common Act application and the market stance pitch and the community asset transfer lease arrangement that's currently being discussed. This will now raise the question of consultation within the Community Empowerment Act, because it could be a common good asset as well as issues to do with community asset transfer. So I thought it was very important for yourselves members to see that process within the report and understand that that also involves a consultation process, and that we will need to follow certain statutory provisions there with regard to the CAT process. And we've not yet done a CAT of a common good asset, so yeah, why not be the first? Let's go for it. And we have to see how they fit together. I'm sure they'll fit together fine. I'm sure we'll work that out between us. And again, it's all about the transparency within the community, the consultation process. We run the consultations for the asset register and for anything we're doing with the assets once identified on the common good on pages on the Highland Council website. There are some that are up there now if you wanted to see examples of how they've been running, how the documents appear when we do those sort of things, how the responses are dealt with and so forth. In respect of any property that we may identify as being inalienable. Now, inalienable is another complicated quirk of common good. Again, it's very difficult to decide in some cases what may be alienable or inalienable. If something is inalienable, the council cannot deal with it as it wants. There's a restriction or a prohibition. It may be that somebody has left an area of land to be a recreation field in all time coming and for no other use, and it always has been a recreation field. That would be inalienable use. Since the boroughs were abolished in 1975, if the council wanted to do anything, a disposal, either a sale or a lease, to change the use of that land, it should have applied to the Sheriff Court or the Court of Session for the authority of the court to do so. It would be fair to say that hasn't always happened, but obviously common good is very much in the spotlight now, and we are very, very aware that that is something that flows as a natural course of events. If we're leasing a property and it's a long lease and we've done a common good consultation, we will also have to go to court. If we're changing the use of land, and it might only involve a small change of use and it might only be a small area of land, we may still have to go to court. In some respects, personally, I think it can sometimes act against community groups, but we are tied by what we're tied with on the statutory provisions. We do review the Common Good Register. My intention would be to do an initial review quite quickly of the ones that were published last February. Thereafter, it has to be no longer than 5 years apart when we review. When we add things to it and when we take things off for whatever reason, it should be amended fairly swiftly and within that financial year. In Highland, we took a view that we were going to consider long leases as disposals, and we take from case law that a long lease is a lease of 10 years or more. Some areas, some other authorities are consulting on every lease regardless of length, and there's nothing in the Community Empowerment Act or the guidance that came out in support of it that actually gives any time for that lease length for disposal. All we know is that a lease is classified as a disposal. It's purely a pragmatic approach in Highland and a number of other areas that maybe operate a number of, say, shorter term leases for their common good assets, that it simply would become unworkable to do a consultation for every single, for instance, 5-year lease or something of an asset. So we've taken a pragmatic approach, and so have a number of other authorities, to say that up to 10 years is not a disposal, and anything of 10 years or more is a disposal. So that's really, I think, as far as I would like to just highlight the points that are in the appendix to the report that includes the process for establishing the register. And I think that's useful to have it. It is on the Highland Council website. It's useful just to have that as an aid memoir. We've also got a third appendix, which is the process for the disposal or change of use of an asset. But again, that's also on the Highland Council website, and they're public documents, so anybody in the community can access them at any time. So I think beyond that, members, just if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take any questions on the appendix.
Thanks, Sarah. This new focus on assets held in the common good could herald a new beginning for the Kingussie and Granton Common Good Funds, and could bring substantial benefit to both towns. But obviously, we only just started this process, but it certainly looks positive for the future. But you know, there's very small cash amounts in both common good funds at the moment. But I know, particularly in Granton, there are other allocations of funding which are basically for the common good. There are various tiny little things that have been amalgamated into this overall Highland-wide fund. And my question would be, can these be clawed back and given to the either of the common good funds? Because there are a number of individual legacies. I don't know so much about the Kingussie end, but certainly at the Granton end there are quite a few. And it comes to far more than a few £100s. It's not a massive amount, but it's more than is there. And on a slightly other note, I noticed that the Kingussie Provost chain is noted as an asset. The Granton Provost chain still exists, and it is in the care of Granton Museum. Will that ownership actually be in the common good, or will it remain with Granton? And you may not be able to answer these off the cuff. I'm quite happy to take an answer later. Members, any other questions? Nobody wants to speak to Sarah. Okay.
Okay. The comment on the small funds and things, if they're the trust funds that might be in existence in the various areas, I am aware of those. I've done a certain amount of work on the trust funds. If property is trust property, it can't also be common good. And we were working at one point on trying to rationalise all the small trust funds. I mean, you're quite right, there's lots of little bits here, there and everywhere that might have specific purposes. Some of them, the purposes have been sort of lost in the mists of time and we're not too sure what they were. Some of them we've been able to identify. And at one point we were doing a piece of work to try and rationalise all those funds. Must be said that in many respects that sort of was just before the sections on the common good came into force with Community Empowerment Act, and since those sections have come into force, I would say the Community Empowerment Act and the common good side of things has sort of overwhelmed the work that we were doing in respect of the trust. It hasn't gone away completely, and from time to time there are specific targeted pieces of advice that certainly I've been giving out to various the board managers and so forth on the trust funds. It wouldn't be the case that they could come into the common good because the two are very different funds. But it might be that the scope, there's certainly legal provision to try and sweep up small funds into another fund. There is a process of doing that. It does involve certain statutory adverts and notices and obviously investigations and so forth. So there are processes whereby funds can all be transferred to, for instance, generate a larger pot that could be used. And I know at one point we did that with the funds that were registered as charities, but the council does hold a reasonable number of what are known as public trusts that are not registered as charities and that have to be handled in a certain way. Trust is something that's very much governed by the Court of Session. So if they're small trust funds, we have a small process that it's not a quick process, but it can be done. If they're larger trust funds, then those applications are Court of Session applications, and we tend to sort of back off a bit because sometimes the cost of actually taking them to the Court of Session can be more than is in the trust funds. So yes, there are steps that can be taken, but it's a separate piece of work. But it certainly is a piece of work that can be looked at some point, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to keep members sighted on, because all these tiny little trusts that ended up in a big central pot, we tend really to have no idea what they are, where they are, and some of them could actually be used for the purpose for which they were intended. So I think it's important that in the future going forward, the local members are kept up to date with the process. Councillor Hadley.
Hi. It was really interesting reading through this, not just for the depth of detail, but the history behind it. And that was leading to my question. Two questions, really. One, how easy is it going to be? Because reading through this, I'm, as a member of Kingussie community, thinking of a piece of land that just sits along from me, which was gifted to the people of Kingussie for recreation, which I can see as a common purpose here. So how easy would it be as a member of the community to actually come forward to the Highland Council and say, please, will you have a look at this? And then the second question, it was around that word inalienable, because I can see that the common purpose for a lot of the ground being gifted to the people of Kingussie and the boroughs, etc., is for a recreation ground and for no other purpose. So, for example, the Aldroni car park, is there an issue there for our current use as a car park? Is car park recreational? It leads to recreational use. Is there any sway in that definition? And I guess what I'm really asking is, the grounds were gifted with a protection, and how strong will that protection be once these things start becoming uncovered, and, you know, can we use it for this and can we use it for that? So I hope those questions made sense and you're able to answer.
Absolutely, they make sense, absolutely. In relation to contact, part of the process is that I have to notify, obviously, the Community Council direct. They get a copy of the proposed list. I also have to identify and do exactly the same with as many community bodies as I can track down in Kingussie. It's advertised, it's published on the council website. We will do a press release, and we do obviously posting on social media. Any responses have to come in written format, and they can come in to me by way of email address. The email address is going to be disclosed in the consultation document, and it's disclosed on the website, or they can come in by post. And actually, interestingly, this time around, with COVID, I've had quite a few postal ones. I don't know quite why. I assumed that I probably wouldn't get any. Normally you get maybe one or two, but I had quite a few that, and we do have a system for that. They come into the council, they get scanned, they get sent to us, and they get retained because it's classified as legal post. So it should be protected in that regard. So we should be able to get our hands on everything that comes in. Yes, you're quite right. When these things had these burdens for recreational use, that is the only use they're supposed to be put to. And again, this is where things have maybe slipped in the midst of time, that permissions were not sought to change the use of things. So where something we've appropriated the use of a part of a playing field, we've changed the use of part of a playing field to a car park, technically, as that was common good and that would be inalienable common good, there should have been a court application for that. There shouldn't necessarily have been a consultation because it happened before the community empowerment. But if it was after 1975, there should have been a court application. It would have just depended whether anyone dug that closely into it. The view that we're taking on any of the funds that we're reactivating any misclassified information is that we have to sort of draw a line under everything. So we can't go back and say, well, actually, you've already done it now. So we want you retrospectively to get permission. We have to acknowledge that maybe it wasn't done correctly then. But this is what the safeguard of the Community Empowerment Act is for. Common good is very much under the spotlight. It's very much more focused now than it was before. It has certain statutory protections. There has to be this consultation. All authorities have to publish their asset register. We have to identify what property exists, and we have to manage it now in a closer way. Although we always had statutory responsibilities to manage it and account for it separately,
communities are being given these very clear statutory rights to be consulted on things and to be involved, and for the decision making to be transparent. And that's flowing on from the fact that we've got this clear understanding that on inalienable land, and inalienable land it was one of those things that, to be fair, the Scottish Government just refused to touch the question of alienability and inalienability. They're just leaving it to local authorities to continue to battle. But it is an added protection, because we're not supposed to have the authority to just deal willy-nilly with items that have been given for a specific purpose, and that's why it's there. We've done a number of applications for permission and for authority. So far, none of them have been opposed, because the consultations have met with either approval, or the one consultation that had certain reasons was quite justified. We accepted it on that occasion, and we took the decision that we wouldn't go ahead with the proposal on that occasion, to give the community in that particular area some time to do some work that they wanted to do. But there won't always be the case whereby every application is going to meet with community approval, or even every decision of the local authority is going to meet with community approval. So we may yet have a contested decision. And when we get to a contested decision, we'll have to go to court if the sheriff chooses to hear, or if it goes as far as a contested court hearing. It's up to the sheriff then to make a decision. So there is that added protection that not only are yourselves as members tasked with the decision-making respect, but in respect of other land, inalienable land, it then has to go to the sheriff, then goes to almost the objective source of decision-making forum then. So it gives the added protection there. So it is very, I mean, common good is regularly mentioned. It's focused on by Scottish Government. They haven't gone so far as widening any statutory provisions beyond the Community Empowerment Act. But people are chipping away at whether or not that needs to be part and parcel of any further statutory reform. So time will tell on that, whether or not we get any further statutory reform on that. But it's very much a hot potato, common good. And Scottish Government and the Land Commission is still looking at how common good can be used to work better for communities. And I think that's what's important now, is that we're in a time whereby we can't sit back on the old common good. We've got to look at how your common good assets can work for the benefit of the community, can maybe be income generated, can start to increase your small pot of money, so that starts to increase, and then you get some benefit that you can see coming from the common good assets that you have.
Councillor Bruce.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm just turning the whole thing upside down. Is there a way of approaching the lawyers in Scotland saying, have you got any small trusts or amalgamated trusts that are applicable to Highland Council? Because I know from what's been said already today, there are these little pockets of funds, and they cost more to administer than they're actually worth. And I was just wondering if you had a rapport with the lawyers of the area, that they could perhaps have a clear out in their petty cash or their trust fund files, and see if there's anything there that will be of benefit.
We have a list of those trusts that are held in Highland Council, and we have a number of lists of those for the different areas across Highland Council, because obviously they get held in areas the same as any other funds get held in areas, and they do get reported from the finance team. So I'm assuming that, I mean, technically it should come before yourselves at some point, members of the funds, the trust funds, for discussion. And I know that Liz Cowie is very aware of trust fund issues, because we've discussed them in connection with other matters before. So it is certainly something that we can look into with a view to doing that piece of work. although my post covers common good, it's now been agreed with Stuart Fraser and Paul Nevin that trust advice does sit squarely under Paul's team, and he was quite happy with that. You know, a little bit of arm twisting. So the advice, we can now give it, whereas until recently it was sort of a case of trying to find a budget to do the work from, but it's now sitting squarely under Paul's team to give that advice. So we can look at that. There are one or two funds, and I think I recently gave some advice to Liz, and she probably discussed it with yourselves, about one of the educational funds, whereby in actual fact some of the Badenoch and Strathspey schools are covered by the Inverness Share Educational Trust. And of course that's a very interesting trust, because it not only covers the schools, because it's the old Shire of Inverness, it covers at least some of the island schools as well. So it's who has the governance over that, because normally, for instance, education funds go with the education authority of the area, but this would go across a number of different areas. So that will be an interesting one to unpick. But again, there are certainly educational funds within that document that cover a number of different areas. Other than that, they're usually fairly well divided in area. And again, there's a member of the finance team in HQ she takes her part of her responsibility is to produce the annual figures for all the trust funds and things like that, and they should usually get circulated. If a trust fund has a capital use that says it's to be held as capital and the income only is to be used, then we can only use the income unless we are able to utilise the short process to be able to amalgamate the capital or spend all the capital. And sometimes we can use that if the purpose for which the original bequest no longer exists or can't be fulfilled. And the problem with that is it's sometimes difficult to find out what that purpose is. If there's no provision, or if it's just an income only fund, you can use that whole fund and then close it. And we have done that in some other areas. So you could do a one-off payment for the whole fund and close it. The difficulty that you have quite often is sometimes the bequests came in by way of a will. John Smith might have said, I leave £100 to Kinnussie Borough Council to be used for the benefit of the poor, making no reference as to whether that £100 was supposed to be kept, or whether, and just the income used, or whether the whole £100 was to be used. Routinely, what has happened is that £100 has been retained as capital. But actually, when you look at the bequests, because I found them one or two bequests in certain areas in council minutes, there hasn't been it's specified that that capital is to be retained. It's just happened during course of events and time. So there would be an argument then that because we didn't have it specified that the capital had to be retained, that actually you could then use that whole fund. But as I say, there is provision whereby you could sweep up the funds, or you also have the various funds that are held within Highland Charities Trust. And obviously those Highland Charities Trusts, the individual area funds there can take donations in. So there's an argument that you could apply for funds from the little pots of funds and the short process to then be paid into whatever the funds are held for the area within Highland Council Charities Trust.
Do you have a rapport with the lawyers to try and sort of sweep up some of these small trusts? I know with village halls and this sort of thing, it's gone back to dealing with lawyers who passed on and trustees that have passed on. But I'm just wondering if, if any law firms, they keep a register of trusts that they administer, but that everything's pretty dormant, and whether they would talk to you about closing down some of these dormant trusts if it was the beneficiaries were the council.
I don't know whether the beneficiaries would be the council. I mean, the trusts that we know about are where the council is acting as public trustee. So we've been given the money to deal with to the benefit of particular organisations or so forth. We have one or two trusts in the area where we receive an income from them, but they're still active. So there's certain areas in the Highlands where we still get an income coming in from trusts that we don't operate the trust, we're just the beneficiaries of. But mostly the only trusts that we know about, and I think it would be quite a difficult job to try and work out if any lawyers are they're doing nothing with that may benefit. They may have them in a way that benefits individuals or individual organisations. So, for instance, thinking about something like a village hall, they may be holding a pot of money that was they're administering for the benefit of the village hall. That doesn't necessarily mean it should come to the council to administer it for the benefit of the village hall. But we certainly have pots of money, little pots of money that we've got sitting around that we are responsible for administering. I think in total across Highland, we've got just over 200 public trusts that we're responsible for administering, and that's not including any of the ones that are held under the 2 umbrella charities that the Highland Council operate. So there's quite a lot of little trusts floating around. I mean, there's some significant ones as well. It must be said that, you know, people have lost what the purposes for them might be. And, you know, there's some significant pots of money sitting in some areas to do with reactivating. And we do attempt to reactivate it, but with anything, it then drops down the priority scale. But, you know, it's the hard one to keep dumping back to the top, really, with everything else.
Okay, thanks very much.
I foresee a very interesting report coming to a future area committee, Sarah. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Sarah. I mean, the level of detail and the comprehensive report is just amazing. But even in the conversation the past 5 minutes, I think particularly things like the school trust and all these other things, we look forward to hearing your update, and thank you for your diligence, because this is incredible. You know, you're starting to, well, you're not starting, but you've unpicked an awful lot that may be of benefit to our communities.
Yes, Sarah, you know, this is I suppose it's like pushing water uphill. You'll be at this for a long time. So I think I never actually understood that I'd be so interested in common good funds all of a sudden. Because every time the Inverness Common Goods Funds is mentioned, I generally just switch off. But now all of a sudden I've become very interested. So it's really, it's a great report, and thank you very much for coming here today. Members, there are 3 recommendations in your paper, and I'd like you to agree the recommendations if you can. Okay, no one is opposed, so the recommendations are agreed.
Brilliant, that's great. I'll get on and sort the publication of that as soon as I can.
Indeed.
Thank you, members.
Thanks, Sarah. Members, the final item is the minutes of the 9th of November. These have already been approved by the council. That are really just there for information. So thank you very much for your time today. That is us. So go and enjoy the sunshine, or like me, have a cup of tea between now and the next meeting. So see you all later.
Another 3 weeks. Take care.
Cheers.